The Mindset of a Billionaire Part 1. How billionaires see the world differently. The difference between a billionaire and everyone else is not intelligence, luck, or even opportunity, it is perception. Long before money appears in their lives, billionaires already see the world through a different lens. Where most people see obstacles, they see systems. Where others see risk, they see positioning. Where many react emotionally to events, they observe quietly, asking a deeper question. How does this really work? A billionaire mindset does not begin with money. It begins with detachment. Detachment from emotion-driven decisions, from short-term thinking, from social pressure, and from the need for immediate validation. Most people are trained to respond quickly, to react, to chase certainty and comfort. Billionaires learn the opposite. They learn to pause, to step back, to let emotion pass before making a move. This pause creates clarity, and clarity creates leverage. From a young stage, even before wealth is visible, billionaires tend to question assumptions others accept as truth. They do not blindly follow traditional paths simply because they are familiar. They ask why things are done a certain way, who benefits from the structure, and whether that structure can be improved, disrupted, or owned. This habit of questioning becomes the foundation of their future wealth. They are not rebels for attention. They are architects looking for weak points in existing systems. Another defining trait of the billionaire mindset is long-term orientation. Most people live in days, weeks, or months. Billionaires think in years, decades, and generations. This changes everything. Decisions are no longer based on quick wins but on compounding outcomes. They willingly sacrifice short-term comfort for long-term dominance, knowing that patience multiplies result. While others chase immediate rewards, billionaires quietly build foundations that take time to mature but are difficult to destroy. They also understand that time itself is an asset, and that wasting it on low-leverage activities is more dangerous than losing money. Money can be recovered, rebuilt, reinvested. Time cannot. This awareness makes them ruthless with priorities. They focus on actions that scale, decisions that compound, and systems that continue working even when they are not present. Every choice is filtered through a simple but powerful question: does this create leverage or consume it? Emotionally, billionaires train themselves to remain stable in chaos. Markets fluctuate, businesses fail, public opinion shifts, and crises emerge without warning. Most people panic when uncertainty appears. Billionaires expect it. They prepare for it. Instead of reacting emotionally, they observe patterns forming beneath the surface. Volatility becomes information. Fear becomes opportunity. While others freeze or flee, billionaires position themselves calmly, knowing that uncertainty is where assets are transferred from the impatient to the disciplined. The billionaire mindset is also deeply ownership-oriented. Employees trade time for money. Consumers trade money for comfort. Billionaires aim to own systems, platforms, assets, and structures that produce value continuously. Ownership creates control. Control creates optionality. Optionality creates freedom. This is why billionaires rarely obsess over salaries or wages. They focus on equity, leverage, and scalability. They want to be paid for results, not hours. Another subtle but powerful difference lies in how billionaires relate to failure. Failure is not personal to them. It is data, information, feedback from reality. While many people avoid failure because it threatens identity or ego, billionaires detach their self-worth from outcomes. They analyze what worked, what didn't, and why, then adjust. This ability to separate emotion from outcome allows them to move faster, take calculated risks, and adapt continuously without being paralyzed by fear or shame. They also understand the importance of environment. Billionaires are intentional about who they listen to, who they associate with, and what information they consume. They know that thinking is shaped by surroundings. A limited environment produces limited thinking. An expansive environment stretches perception. This is why they seek rooms where they are not the smartest, conversations that challenge them, and ideas that feel uncomfortable at first. Growth begins at the edge of familiarity. Perhaps most importantly, billionaires believe deeply in personal responsibility. They do not wait to be saved by systems, governments, employers, or luck. They see themselves as the primary driver of outcomes in their life. Even when external forces are unfavorable, they ask, what can I control? How can I reposition? Where is the opportunity hidden inside this constraint? This mindset transforms obstacles into stepping stones and keeps them moving forward when others stop. The mindset of a billionaire is not loud, flashy, or reckless. It is quiet, patient, strategic, and disciplined. It is built on observation rather than reaction, on ownership rather than consumption, on long-term thinking rather than instant gratification. Money eventually follows this mindset, not the other way around. And as this book unfolds, you will begin to see that wealth is not something billionaires chase. It is something they attract by how they think, decide, and position themselves in the world. Part 2. How billionaires think about money, scarcity, and opportunity. The way billionaires think about money is fundamentally different from how most people are conditioned to think about it, and this difference shapes every decision they make long before wealth ever appears. For the average person, money is emotional. It represents safety, fear, status, freedom, stress, and self-worth all at once. Because of this emotional weight, most people react to money instead of thinking clearly about it. They fear losing it, obsess over not having enough of it, and make decisions driven by anxiety or desperation. Billionaires, on the other hand, train themselves to see money not as an emotional symbol, but as a tool, a measurement of value, a medium of exchange, and a reflection of systems working properly or improperly. This emotional detachment gives them clarity where others experience panic. Scarcity is one of the most powerful forces shaping human behavior. Most people grow up in a scarcity framework, whether financial, emotional, or psychological. Scarcity teaches them to hold tightly, to protect, to avoid risk, to prioritize short-term survival over long-term growth. Billionaires recognize scarcity for what it is, a mental condition rather than a permanent reality. They understand that scarcity narrows perception. When people feel scarce, they stop seeing options, creativity disappears, and decision-making becomes reactive. This is why billionaires work relentlessly to eliminate scarcity thinking from their minds, even when they are not yet wealthy. They know that a scarce mind cannot build abundant systems. Instead of asking, "How do I get more money?" billionaires ask, "How do I create more value?" This shift is subtle but transformational. Money is never the target, it is the byproduct. Value creation is the engine. When value is created at scale, money follows naturally. Most people chase income directly, moving from job to job, deal to deal, hoping for relief. Billionaires focus on solving problems, reducing friction, increasing efficiency, and improving systems. They study where people struggle, where time is wasted, where costs are high, and where processes are broken. Opportunity exists wherever inefficiency exists. Opportunity, to a billionaire, is rarely obvious in the moment. It often looks uncomfortable, uncertain, or boring. Many of the greatest opportunities appear during chaos, confusion, or transition, precisely because most people are emotionally overwhelmed at those times. Billionaires expect instability. They prepare for downturns when times are good, and they expand aggressively when others are contracting. This is not recklessness, it is positioning. When fear dominates the environment, assets are mispriced, talent becomes available, and competition weakens. Billionaires understand this pattern and position themselves accordingly. Money, in the billionaire mindset, is meant to flow, not sit idle. Hoarding money out of fear is a sign of scarcity thinking. Spending money recklessly for status is a sign of insecurity. Billionaires allocate money strategically. Every dollar is assigned a role. Some dollars are for stability, some for growth, some for experimentation, and some for long-term positioning. They think in terms of capital allocation, not spending. This allows them to move resources efficiently toward outcomes that compound over time. They also understand that money behaves differently depending on who controls it. In the hands of someone without discipline or structure, money disappears quickly. In the hands of someone who understands leverage, systems, and compounding, money accelerates. This is why many people who suddenly receive money lose it, while others steadily grow modest resources into enormous fortunes. The difference is not intelligence, it is structure and mindset. Another critical distinction is how billionaires relate to debt. To most people, debt is dangerous, stressful, and something to be avoided at all costs. Billionaires differentiate between destructive debt and strategic debt. Destructive debt finances consumption and produces no return. Strategic debt finances assets, systems, and growth that outpace the cost of borrowing. This does not mean reckless borrowing. It means understanding risk, cash flow, and leverage deeply enough to use debt as a tool rather than a trap. Time and money are inseparable in the billionaire mindset. Time is the non-renewable asset. Money is renewable. Billionaires are willing to spend money to save time, to buy speed, clarity, expertise, and leverage. They outsource low-value tasks, automate processes, and invest in tools that multiply their effectiveness. While others trade time to earn money, billionaires use money to buy back time, allowing them to focus on decisions that move the needle exponentially. Emotion control plays a central role here. Financial decisions made under emotional pressure are almost always suboptimal. Billionaires train themselves to delay gratification, to tolerate discomfort, and to resist impulsive behavior. They understand that markets reward patience and punish emotional volatility. When prices rise rapidly, they resist greed. When prices fall sharply, they resist fear. Emotional neutrality becomes a competitive advantage. They also understand that wealth is built through asymmetry. Asymmetric opportunities offer limited downside and massive upside. Most people avoid these opportunities because they look uncertain or unconventional. Billionaires seek them deliberately. They place small, calculated bets on ideas, ventures, and people with disproportionate potential. Many will fail, but a few successes more than compensate for the losses. This portfolio-style thinking allows them to progress without risking total collapse. Social conditioning works against this mindset. Society often teaches safety, predictability, and conformity. Billionaires question these narratives. They ask whether safety is real or merely perceived, whether predictability leads to stagnation, and whether conformity suppresses innovation. This does not make them reckless. It makes them independent thinkers. They filter advice carefully, knowing that most guidance comes from people who have not achieved the outcomes they desire. Another powerful element is how billionaires view income versus wealth. Income is linear and fragile. Wealth is exponential and resilient. Income stops when effort stops. Wealth continues producing regardless of daily involvement. Billionaires prioritize building assets over increasing income. Assets may take longer to develop, but they create freedom, flexibility, and optionality once established. This shift changes how they evaluate opportunities, careers, and business models. They are also deeply aware that money amplifies character rather than changing it. Wealth does not fix discipline, clarity, or emotional instability. It magnifies what already exists. This is why billionaires focus heavily on personal development, mental discipline, and decision-making frameworks long before financial success arrives. They build the internal capacity to handle scale, complexity, and pressure. Without this foundation, wealth becomes a liability rather than a blessing. The billionaire mindset is not obsessed with appearances. It is obsessed with positioning. Flashy displays often signal insecurity or short-term thinking. Billionaires care more about control, influence, optionality, and long-term advantage. They are willing to look ordinary while building extraordinary systems beneath the surface. Silence, patience, and consistency protect their edge. At its core, the billionaire relationship with money is grounded in calm, clarity, and strategic thinking. Money is not feared, worshipped, or avoided. It is studied, respected, and directed intentionally. Scarcity is recognized as a mental trap. Opportunity is recognized as a function of perception, timing, and preparation. And wealth, when it arrives, is the natural outcome of thinking correctly for a long time, not the result of a single lucky break. As this mindset deepens, decisions become cleaner, reactions slower, and confidence quieter. The world may appear chaotic, but to those who understand money at this level, patterns emerge where others see randomness. And within those patterns lies the foundation of extraordinary wealth. Part 3. How billionaires understand time, patience, and compounding. The most misunderstood advantage billionaires possess is not intelligence, capital, or connections, it is their relationship with time. While most people experience time as something constantly slipping away, something to race against, something that creates pressure and anxiety, billionaires experience time as something to align with. They do not fight time. They do not rush it. They do not attempt to outpace it. Instead, they learn its rhythms, respect its power, and position themselves so that time works for them rather than against them. This single shift in perception quietly separates extraordinary outcomes from ordinary lives. Most people are trapped in short time horizons. They think in paychecks, weeks, months, or at best a few years. This narrow window forces decisions that prioritize speed over quality, comfort over leverage, and certainty over compounding. Billionaires stretch their time horizon deliberately. They think in decades, not because they are patient by nature, but because they understand a truth most people never internalize. The longer your time horizon, the fewer competitors you have. When you are willing to wait, build slowly, and endure uncertainty, you automatically remove the majority of people from competition with you. Patience, for a billionaire, is not passive waiting. It is active positioning. While others rush to act so they feel productive, billionaires spend enormous amounts of time observing, learning, preparing, and refining their understanding before committing resources. This often makes them appear slow or hesitant to outsiders. In reality, they are compressing decades of insight into moments of decisive action. When they finally move, it looks effortless, but only because the preparation was invisible. They understand that most value in the world compounds quietly. Compounding is not loud. It does not announce itself. It is boring in the early stages and uncomfortable because it requires faith without immediate validation. Most people abandon compounding too early because the results feel insignificant at first. Billionaires endure this phase because they understand the mathematics of momentum. They know that growth is not linear, it is exponential. What feels slow today becomes unstoppable tomorrow. This understanding shapes how they approach learning. Billionaires do not cram knowledge or chase information endlessly. They focus on foundational principles that remain relevant across time, industries, and technologies. Decision-making framework, human psychology, incentives, systems thinking, power dynamics. These principles compound intellectually. Each new insight connects to previous ones, creating depth rather than noise. Over time, their thinking becomes clearer, faster, and more accurate, not because they consume more information, but because their internal models are refined and reinforced through repetition and experience. The same logic applies to relationship. Billionaires invest in long-term relationships rather than transactional interactions. They understand that trust compounds, reputation compounds, credibility compounds. A relationship nurtured over years creates leverage that no amount of short-term networking can replicate. When opportunities arise, these relationships activate naturally. Doors open without force. Access is granted without asking. This is not coincidence. It is the compound effect of consistency and integrity applied over time. Time also changes how billionaires interpret setback. When operating within a long horizon, temporary losses lose their emotional weight. A bad quarter, a failed project, or a missed opportunity does not define the journey. It becomes a data point, a lesson, a calibration. Most people overreact to short-term pain because they see it as permanent. Billionaires see it as transient. This emotional stability allows them to stay in the game long enough for compounding to work. They also understand that impatience is one of the most expensive habits a person can have. Impatience leads to premature exits, poor investments, unnecessary risk, and emotional decisions. It forces people to abandon strong positions too early or chase outcomes before foundations are built. Billionaires train themselves to tolerate boredom, uncertainty, and delayed gratification. They understand that the ability to wait calmly while doing the right things consistently is a superpower in a world addicted to immediacy. Another critical distinction is how billionaires sequence their efforts. They do not attempt to optimize everything at once. They focus on the right thing at the right time. Early stages are about learning, experimentation, and positioning. Middle stages are about scaling what works and eliminating distractions. Later stages are about consolidation, protection, and optimization. Each phase requires different behaviors, mindsets, and strategies. Confusing these phases leads to burnout or stagnation. Understanding them creates momentum. Billionaires also recognize that compounding applies not only to money, but to habits, decisions, and identity. Small daily choices repeated consistently shape outcomes far more than occasional bursts of effort. They build routines that support clarity, discipline, and long-term performance. They are careful about what they tolerate in their lives because tolerance compounds too. Small compromises today become major constraints tomorrow. By maintaining high standards consistently, they prevent erosion of focus and effectiveness. Time, for a billionaire, is not filled randomly. It is structured intentionally. They create space for thinking, reflection, and strategic planning. They protect their attention aggressively because attention determines where energy flows, and energy compounds where it is focused. Distraction is seen as a hidden tax on future outcomes. This is why billionaires often appear selective, even unavailable. They are not avoiding people or opportunities. They are guarding the conditions necessary for high-quality decisions. They also understand that timing matters as much as effort. Acting too early can be as costly as acting too late. A brilliant idea introduced before the market is ready fails. A strong business launched in the wrong economic cycle struggles unnecessarily. Billionaires study timing carefully. They watch trends, behaviors, adoption curves, and macro shift. When conditions align, they move decisively. This ability to synchronize action with timing multiplies the effectiveness of every decision. Importantly, billionaires do not romanticize speed. Speed without direction leads to exhaustion. Speed without structure creates chaos. Speed without patience destroys compounding. They move fast only after clarity is established. Until then, they move deliberately. This balance allows them to maintain momentum without burning out or making reckless decisions. Over long periods, this approach produces an almost unfair advantage. While others start and stop, pivot constantly, or abandon efforts due to frustration, billionaires remain steady. Progress accumulates, skills sharpen, networks deepen, capital grows. Eventually, the gap between them and others becomes so wide that it appears as if success happened suddenly. In reality, it was the result of years of invisible compounding. This mindset reshapes how billionaires experience life itself. They are less reactive, less anxious, and less pressured by external noise. They trust their process because it is grounded in time-tested principles rather than emotion. They understand that extraordinary outcomes require endurance, not urgency. And because they align themselves with time rather than fighting it, they are able to build things that last. When time becomes an ally rather than an enemy, patience stops feeling like sacrifice and starts feeling like strategy. Compounding stops being abstract and becomes inevitable. And the billionaire mindset solidifies into something unshakable, the quiet confidence that comes from knowing that if you think correctly, act consistently, and give time enough room to work, the results cannot help but follow. Part 4. How billionaires make decisions under uncertainty, pressure, and incomplete information. One of the clearest distinctions between billionaires and everyone else is not what they know, but how they decide when they do not know. Most people wait for certainty before acting. They want guarantees, reassurance, confirmation, and permission. They delay decisions until the picture feels complete, comfortable, and safe. Billionaires understand something uncomfortable but fundamental. Certainty almost never arrives. The world moves forward on incomplete information, imperfect data, and shifting conditions. Those who wait for clarity usually arrive late, while those who learn to decide within uncertainty shape outcomes instead of reacting to them. Uncertainty, to most people, feels like danger. It triggers anxiety, hesitation, and overthinking. The human brain is wired to avoid unknowns because they represent potential loss. Billionaires retrain this instinct. They do not eliminate fear, but they learn to interpret uncertainty as a signal rather than a threat. Where others freeze, they ask better questions. What variables matter most? What can be controlled? What assumptions are being made? What is likely, not possible? This shift transforms uncertainty from an emotional problem into a strategic one. Pressure amplifies this difference. Under pressure, most people narrow their thinking. They become reactive, defensive, and impulsive. They rush decisions to escape discomfort or delay decisions to avoid responsibility. Billionaires train themselves to remain calm under pressure, not because they feel less stress, but because they have systems for decision-making that do not rely on emotion. They slow down internally even when external circumstances demand speed. This internal calm allows them to see options that others miss and avoid mistakes others make reflexively. A key principle guiding billionaire decisions is reversibility. Not all decisions carry the same weight. Some decisions are reversible. If they go wrong, they can be adjusted, exited, or corrected with limited damage. Others are irreversible. Once made, they permanently alter the trajectory. Most people treat all decisions as irreversible, which paralyzes them. Billionaires separate decisions carefully. They move quickly on reversible decisions and slow down on irreversible ones. This distinction allows them to act decisively without being reckless. Incomplete information is the norm, not the exception. Billionaires accept this reality early. They understand that waiting for perfect data often creates worse outcomes than acting on good enough information. Instead of trying to eliminate uncertainty, they design decisions that work across multiple possible futures. They ask, if this goes well, what is the upside? If it goes poorly, what is the downside? Can I survive the downside? If the downside is survivable and the upside is significant, the decision becomes attractive even without certainty. They also rely heavily on probabilistic thinking. Instead of asking whether something will work, they ask how likely it is to work and what happens across different scenarios. This mindset removes emotional attachment to single outcomes. A decision does not need to be right every time to be profitable. It needs to be right often enough, with outcomes structured so wins outweigh losses. This is why billionaires are comfortable making decisions others avoid. They understand that success is not about avoiding mistakes. It is about managing them intelligently. Another defining trait is how billionaires handle responsibility. Many people avoid decisions because they fear blame, regret, or judgment. Billionaires accept responsibility fully. They understand that ownership over decisions is inseparable from ownership over outcomes. This acceptance creates clarity. When responsibility is embraced rather than avoided, decisions become cleaner and more deliberate. There is no need to justify choices to everyone else, because the billionaire is prepared to live with the consequences. They are also careful about who influences their decisions. Noise is dangerous. Opinions are abundant, but insight is rare. Billionaires filter input aggressively. They value expertise, experience, and results over popularity or consensus. They listen to people who have navigated similar situations successfully, not to those speculating from the sidelines. This protects them from herd behavior, which often leads to crowded trades and mediocre outcomes. Emotion management plays a critical role here. Fear and greed are powerful forces, especially in high-stakes environments. Billionaires train themselves to recognize emotional spikes without acting on them immediately. They create distance between stimulus and response. This pause allows rational thinking to return before a decision is made. Over time, this habit becomes automatic. Emotional discipline becomes one of their strongest competitive advantages. They also understand that inaction is a decision. Avoiding a choice has consequences just as real as making the wrong one. Many people tell themselves they are being cautious when they are actually avoiding discomfort. Billionaires are honest with themselves about this. If they choose not to act, it is because that decision aligns with their strategy, not because they are afraid. This honesty preserves momentum and self-trust. Experience compounds decision quality. Each decision, regardless of outcome, provides feedback. Billionaires reflect on this feedback deliberately. They analyze not only results, but reasoning. Was the decision process sound? Were assumptions valid? Was emotion involved? This reflective practice sharpens intuition over time. What outsiders call gut instinct is often the result of thousands of decisions analyzed, refined, and internalized. Importantly, billionaires do not chase perfection. Perfectionism is often disguised fear. It delays action and prevents learning. Billionaires aim for progressive refinement. They act, observe, adjust, and improve. This iterative approach allows them to stay aligned with reality rather than clinging to static plans. Flexibility becomes a strength rather than a weakness. Decision-making under uncertainty also requires confidence, but not arrogance. Billionaires are confident in their process, not in being right. This humility keeps them open to new information and willing to change course when conditions shift. Stubbornness destroys capital. Adaptability preserves it. As decisions accumulate over time, patterns emerge. Billionaires learn which types of decisions produce leverage, which environments amplify their strengths, and which situations consistently drain energy or resources. This self-knowledge allows them to design their lives and businesses to minimize unnecessary complexity. Fewer decisions, made with higher quality, produce better outcomes than constant reactive choices. In a world obsessed with speed and certainty, billionaires master something quieter and far more powerful: calm decisiveness in uncertainty. They accept that not knowing is part of the game. They structure decisions to survive mistakes. They manage emotion under pressure. And they trust a process refined through time, experience, and reflection. This is how they move forward when others hesitate. This is how they build momentum while others wait. And this is how, decision by decision, they shape futures that look inevitable in hindsight, but were anything but certain in the moment. Part 5. How billionaires think about risk, failure, and becoming unbreakable. Most people misunderstand risk completely. They believe risk is something to avoid, something dangerous, something that threatens stability and safety. This belief shapes cautious lives, small decisions, and limited outcomes. Billionaires do not eliminate risk from their lives, they redefine it. To them, risk is not the presence of uncertainty, but the absence of preparation, understanding, and adaptability. What terrifies most people becomes manageable, even strategic, once it is understood properly. The average person experiences risk emotionally. Fear rises, the mind tightens, and decisions become defensive. People avoid opportunities not because they are objectively dangerous, but because uncertainty triggers discomfort. Billionaires notice this pattern early. They realize that fear is often a signal pointing to growth, leverage, or asymmetric opportunity. Instead of running from fear, they investigate it. They ask what exactly could go wrong, how bad the downside truly is, and whether that downside is survivable. Most of the time, they discover that the imagined risk is far greater than the real one. Failure, in the billionaire mindset, is stripped of its emotional drama. It is not an identity, not a verdict, not a permanent stain. Failure is feedback. Information delivered by reality. A signal that something did not work as expected. Most people avoid failure because they confuse outcomes with self-worth. Billionaires separate the two. This separation gives them extraordinary freedom. They can experiment, test, and explore without internal collapse. Each failure refines their understanding, sharpens their instincts, and improves future decisions. Resilience is not built through comfort. It is built through exposure to difficulty, pressure, and uncertainty. Billionaires intentionally place themselves in situations that stretch their capacity. They do not seek pain for its own sake, but they do not avoid it either. They understand that resilience compounds just like capital. Each challenge faced and processed builds psychological strength. Over time, this creates an inner stability that does not depend on external conditions. One of the most important distinctions billionaires make is between risk and ruin. Risk is acceptable. Ruin is not. They are willing to take many risks, but they structure those risks so that no single failure can destroy them completely. This is a critical insight. Most people either take no risks at all or take catastrophic ones. Billionaires design their lives, investments, and decisions so that failure is painful but survivable. This allows them to stay in the game long enough for probability and compounding to work in their favor. They also understand that avoiding risk entirely is itself a massive risk. Playing it safe often leads to stagnation, erosion of opportunity, and dependence on fragile systems. Inflation, technological change, and shifting markets punish those who remain static. Billionaires recognize that not adapting is often more dangerous than taking calculated risk. This awareness pushes them to move while others hesitate. Emotionally, billionaires train themselves to recover quickly. Setbacks do not spiral into self-doubt or paralysis. They feel disappointment, frustration, even anger, but they do not live there. They process the emotion, extract the lesson, and move forward. This emotional agility keeps momentum intact. Momentum, once lost, is difficult to regain. Billionaires protect it fiercely. They are also deeply aware that confidence is built through evidence, not affirmation. Each risk taken, each failure survived, each recovery strengthens their belief in their ability to handle future uncertainty. This creates a feedback loop. Confidence leads to action. Action leads to experience. Experience leads to competence. Competence reinforces confidence. Over time, this loop makes them appear fearless, when in reality they are simply experienced. Another key element is how billionaires frame worst-case scenarios. Instead of avoiding them, they analyze them calmly. What happens if this fails? What resources do I lose? What remains intact? Can I rebuild from there? This exercise often reveals that the worst case is not fatal. Once this is understood, fear loses its grip. Action becomes possible again. They also recognize that resilience is not only individual, but structural. They build buffers into their lives, financial reserves, multiple income streams, diverse skills, strong networks. These buffers absorb shocks and provide optionality. When one area falters, another supports them. This structural resilience allows them to take bold action without reckless exposure. Failure also teaches humility. Billionaires who last understand that arrogance is dangerous. Markets change. People change. Conditions shift. Success does not guarantee future outcomes. This humility keeps them learning, listening, and adjusting. It prevents complacency. Resilience is not about believing you will always win, it is about believing you can adapt when you don't. Over time, this relationship with risk and failure transforms how billionaires experience life. They are less anxious, less reactive, and less dependent on certainty. They trust their ability to respond effectively, even when outcomes are unclear. This trust creates freedom. Freedom to explore, to build, to lead, and to create at a level most people never reach. While others seek safety in predictability, billionaires find stability in adaptability. While others fear failure, billionaires mine it for insight. While others crumble under pressure, billionaires grow stronger. This does not make them invincible, but it makes them remarkably difficult to break. And as this mindset deepens, risk stops feeling like danger and starts feeling like terrain. Failure stops feeling like loss and starts feeling like refinement. Resilience stops being something you hope for and becomes something you rely on. This is how billionaires stay standing when others fall. This is how they recover faster than others can react. And this is how, over time, they build lives and fortunes that are not fragile, but forged through understanding, discipline, and repeated exposure to reality. Chapter 6. Discipline when motivation disappears. There comes a point in every serious journey where motivation quietly leaves the room. Not with drama. Not with an announcement. It simply fades. One day you wake up and the fire that once pushed you out of bed is gone. The excitement that made the work feel light has vanished. The goals are still there, but the emotional fuel is empty. This is where most people stop. This is also where disciplined people are born. Discipline is not built when you feel like moving. It is built when you don't. Motivation is a feeling. Discipline is a decision. Feelings rise and fall depending on sleep, stress, praise, criticism, weather, money, and mood. Decisions are steady. Decisions do not wait for perfect conditions. They operate even when conditions are bad. Especially when conditions are bad. Most people unknowingly train themselves to depend on motivation. They wait to feel inspired before they act. They tell themselves they'll start when the timing feels right. When energy is high. When life calms down. But life never truly calms down. There is always something. And motivation, by its nature, is unreliable. If your progress depends on motivation, your results will always be inconsistent. Discipline begins the moment you accept a hard truth. You will not always feel like doing what must be done. In fact, most of the time, you won't. And that is not a flaw. That is normal. The problem isn't the lack of motivation. The problem is the belief that you need it. When motivation disappears, excuses get louder. Your mind becomes a negotiator. It starts offering deals. Just today off. You deserve rest. You'll do it tomorrow. These thoughts feel reasonable. They sound logical. But they are dangerous because they slowly rewire your identity. Every time you listen to them, you teach yourself that comfort is more important than commitment. Discipline is learning to act without emotional permission. This does not mean becoming harsh or robotic. It means becoming reliable to yourself. It means showing up even when no one is watching, even when there is no immediate reward, even when progress feels invisible. Especially then. One of the biggest mistakes people make is trying to replace motivation with intensity. They push hard for a short time, burn out, then crash. Discipline is not intensity. Discipline is consistency. It is doing the ordinary work repeatedly, with patience, without drama. It is choosing the boring path over the exciting one, because the boring path worked. When motivation is gone, structure becomes your lifeline. You don't rely on how you feel. You rely on what you've decided in advance. This is why disciplined people plan their actions before emotions get involved. They decide their routines, standards, and non-negotiables ahead of time. When the moment comes, there is nothing to debate. The decision has already been made. Your mind will resist structure at first. It prefers freedom. But what it really wants is comfort. And comfort is expensive. It costs progress. It costs growth. It costs self-respect. Structure, on the other hand, creates freedom over time. It removes friction. It reduces decision fatigue. It allows you to move even when your emotions are tired. Another key shift is understanding that discipline is not about forcing yourself forever. It's about lowering the barrier to action. When motivation is low, your goal is not to perform at your best. Your goal is to perform at all. Small actions done consistently outperform big actions done occasionally. Showing up at 30% is infinitely better than not showing up at all. When you stop demanding perfection from yourself, discipline becomes sustainable. There will be days when everything feels heavy. On those days, discipline looks like doing the minimum that keeps the habit alive. Writing 1 page, reading 1 paragraph, exercising for 5 minutes. These actions may feel insignificant, but they preserve momentum. They protect identity. They send a powerful message to your brain. I am the kind of person who shows up even when it's hard. Identity is everything. Every action you take is a vote for the person you are becoming. When motivation disappears, the only thing that keeps you moving is identity. Not the outcome, not the reward, but who you believe you are. Disciplined people don't ask, "Do I feel like it?" They ask, "What does someone like me do in this situation?" This question removes emotion from the equation. It shifts the focus from temporary feelings to long-term character. And character is built in silence, repetition, and resistance. Another truth most people avoid is that boredom is part of mastery. The early stages of anything new are exciting because everything is unfamiliar. But as you improve, the work becomes repetitive, predictable, less stimulating. This is where people quit, thinking something is wrong. Nothing is wrong. This is the stage where real progress happens. Discipline means staying when novelty fades. It means understanding that the lack of excitement is not a signal to stop. It is a signal that you are no longer a beginner. And beginners chase excitement. Professionals chase result. When motivation disappears, your environment matters more than your willpower. Willpower is limited. Environment is constant. Disciplined people design their surroundings to support the behavior they want, not the behavior they're trying to avoid. They remove friction from good habits and add friction to bad ones. They don't rely on strength alone. They rely on systems. If you want to act disciplined when motivation is low, you must make the disciplined choice the easiest one available. Over time, this changes how effort feels. What once felt like force begins to feel normal. Routine replaces resistance, and discipline becomes less about struggle and more about rhythm. Another important shift is learning to separate emotions from instructions. Your mind will generate emotions automatically. You cannot control that, but you can choose whether those emotions get to dictate your actions. Discipline is not the absence of emotion. It is the refusal to let emotion take control. You can feel tired and still act. You can feel uninspired and still move. You can feel doubt and still continue. Waiting to feel ready is a trap. Readiness is built by action, not before it. When motivation disappears, remind yourself why you started, but do not depend on that memory to carry you. Reasons inspire beginnings. Systems sustain progress. Purpose lights the path. Discipline keeps you walking when the light dims. There will be moments when you feel like nothing is changing, when effort seems pointless, when results lag behind work. This is where discipline becomes faith. Faith that consistency compounds. Faith that unseen progress is still progress. Faith that showing up today matters, even if you can't see how yet. Most people quit during this phase because they mistake silence for failure. but silence is often growth happening underground. Discipline is trusting the process when feedback is delayed. And slowly something changes. Not overnight, not dramatically, but steadily. The resistance fades. The routine becomes familiar. The work becomes part of who you are. And motivation, interestingly, begins to return, not as a requirement but as a byproduct. Motivation follows action more often than action follows motivation. By the time you realize it, you're no longer relying on feelings. You're relying on standards. You're no longer trying to convince yourself. You're simply executing. And this is the quiet power of discipline. It carries you forward long after motivation has left, and long before motivation returns. Chapter 7. The Discipline of Saying No. One of the most overlooked forms of discipline is not what you do, but what you refuse to do. Most people think discipline is about adding more habits, more routines, more effort, more hustle. But real discipline is subtraction. It is the ability to say no when everything in you wants to say yes. No to distractions. No to comfort. No to shortcuts. No to people, situations, and impulses that pull you away from the life you are trying to build. Every yes costs you something. It costs time. It costs energy. It costs focus. And because your time, energy, and focus are limited, every yes is also an invisible no to something else. When you say yes to scrolling, you say no to progress. When you say yes to procrastination, you say no to momentum. When you say yes to comfort, you say no to growth. Undisciplined lives are not chaotic by accident. They are crowded. Crowded with commitments that don't matter, habits that don't serve, and distractions that slowly drain potential. Discipline begins when you decide to protect your future more than you protect your feelings. Saying no is uncomfortable. It creates friction. It can make you feel guilty, selfish, or isolated. But discipline has never been about being liked. It has always been about being aligned. Aligned with your values. Aligned with your goals. Aligned with the person you are becoming. Most people struggle with saying no because they confuse discipline with deprivation. They believe that by refusing certain things, they are missing out. But what they are really missing out on is focus. And focus is the multiplier of everything meaningful. You cannot build a powerful life while constantly entertaining weak distractions. The disciplined person understands that not everything deserves access to them. Not every invitation deserves an answer. Not every urge deserves obedience. Discipline is learning to pause between impulse and action, and choosing deliberately instead of reacting automatically. This pause is where power lives. Without it, life becomes reactive. You move based on what feels good in the moment, what others expect, what is easiest, what is loudest. With it, life becomes intentional. You move based on standards, priorities, and long-term vision. Saying no to others often means saying yes to yourself. But this only works if you respect yourself enough to keep that promise. Many people say no externally but still sabotage themselves internally. They avoid distractions but allow negative self-talk. They cancel plans but waste the time anyway. Discipline requires consistency between your decisions and your behavior. Another hard truth is that some opportunities are distractions in disguise. They look productive. They sound impressive. They come with praise and validation. But they pull you away from your main focus. Disciplined people are selective. They understand that doing fewer things well beats doing many things poorly. Focus requires sacrifice, and sacrifice requires clarity. When you are clear about where you are going, saying no becomes easier. Not easy, but easier. The problem is that most people have vague goals. They want success, freedom, or more money, but they don't define what those things actually require. Without clarity, everything feels equally important. And when everything is important, nothing truly is. Discipline sharpens priorities. Another area where saying no becomes critical is comfort. Comfort is seductive because it feels harmless. It whispers, not shouts. It convinces you that rest is always deserved, that tomorrow is guaranteed, that effort can wait. Comfort does not ruin lives quickly. It ruins them slowly, quietly, over years of small compromises. Discipline is the willingness to be uncomfortable in the short term to avoid regret in the long term. This does not mean rejecting rest or balance. It means rejecting unnecessary ease. It means choosing growth-oriented discomfort over stagnation disguised as peace. There is a difference between recovery and avoidance. Disciplined people know the difference. Saying no also applies to the version of yourself that wants instant gratification. The part of you that wants rewards now without effort. That part is not evil, it is human. But it cannot be in charge. If it is, your life will always be dictated by the shortest path to pleasure, not the strongest path to progress. Every time you say no to an impulse, you strengthen self-trust. You prove to yourself that you are capable of restraint. And restraint builds confidence. Not the loud, showy kind, but the quiet kind that comes from knowing you can rely on yourself under pressure. This confidence compounds. At first, saying no feels heavy. It feels like loss. But over time, it feels like control. You stop feeling pulled in every direction. Your mind becomes clearer. Your days become simpler. Your actions become more intentional. And with that clarity comes momentum. Another challenge is saying no to people who are used to having access to you. When you change, not everyone will understand. Some will feel threatened. Some will feel abandoned. Some will try to guilt you back into old patterns. Discipline means accepting that not everyone will support your growth. You are not responsible for managing other people's discomfort with your boundaries. Boundaries are not walls. They are filters. They let in what supports your future and block what undermines it. And every boundary you enforce teaches others how to treat you, and teaches yourself how seriously you take your own life. Saying no is also about timing. Some things are not bad, they are just premature. Discipline means delaying certain pleasures until they no longer interfere with your foundation. Many people reward themselves too early. They celebrate before consistency is built. They relax before momentum is established. Disciplined people earn their ease. Delayed gratification is not denial. It is strategy. When you consistently say no to what doesn't serve you, you create space. Space for deep work. Space for reflection. Space for improvement. Space for opportunities that actually matter. A crowded life cannot grow. A focused one can. Over time, saying no reshapes your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who resists temptation and start seeing yourself as someone who simply doesn't entertain it. The internal debate fades. What once required effort becomes automatic. This is when discipline stops feeling like discipline and starts feeling like alignment. You are no longer fighting yourself. You are honoring yourself. The discipline of saying no is not about restriction. It is about respect. Respect for your time. Respect for your energy. Respect for your future. And once you understand that, saying no is no longer something you dread. It becomes something you protect. Because every disciplined no is a quiet yes to the life you are building. Chapter 8. Thinking in decades, not days. One of the clearest differences between ordinary thinking and billionaire thinking is the time horizon. Most people live inside days. Some manage weeks. A few stretch to months. But those who build extraordinary wealth, influence, and inner stability operate in decades. They make decisions today with a version of themselves in mind that most people haven't even imagined yet. Short-term thinking feels natural because it is emotional. It responds to urgency, discomfort, excitement, fear, and comparison. Long-term thinking feels unnatural at first because it requires patience, imagination, and restraint. It asks you to delay reaction in favor of direction. It asks you to sacrifice certainty for compounding outcomes. Billionaire mindset is not about predicting the future perfectly. It is about positioning yourself so that time works for you instead of against you. Most people underestimate what they can build in 10 years and overestimate what they can achieve in one. This imbalance creates frustration. When results don't arrive quickly, they assume the effort is useless. They quit, pivot, distract themselves, or look for shortcuts. But the truth is that meaningful outcomes are slow because they are layered. Skill stacks on skill. Reputation stacks on trust. Capital stacks on consistency. Identity stacks on repeated behavior. Time does the heavy lifting, but only if you stay in the game long enough. Thinking in decades changes how you respond to setbacks. When your timeline is short, every obstacle feels catastrophic. A failure feels final. A delay feels like rejection. A mistake feels like proof that you are not capable. But when you zoom out, setbacks become data. They are no longer verdicts, they are feedback. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this teaching me for the long run?" This shift alone reduces emotional volatility. You become calmer, less reactive, more strategic. You stop burning energy on panic and redirect it toward adjustment. Long-term thinkers are not immune to frustration, they are just less enslaved by it. Another consequence of long-term thinking is that you stop chasing appearances. Many short-term wins look impressive but weaken you over time. They inflate ego without building skill. They generate income without building leverage. They create visibility without credibility. Long-term thinkers are willing to look slow, quiet, or even invisible while they build something solid underneath. They understand that applause is not progress. This is why many truly wealthy individuals spent years unnoticed. They were learning, failing privately, refining systems, and building resilience while others were busy broadcasting early wins. When their success finally appeared, it looked sudden to outsiders, but it was anything but. Decade thinking also reframes discipline. Discipline is no longer about forcing yourself through misery. It becomes about protecting your future self. Every choice becomes a vote. Every habit is a brick. Every day is a deposit into a life that will one day feel inevitable. When you think this way, motivation becomes less important. You don't need to feel inspired to do what is aligned with your long-term identity. You act because this is who you are becoming. Emotion becomes secondary to intention. This mindset also transforms how you view money. Money is no longer just spending power. It becomes stored time, stored effort, stored leverage. You become less impressed by consumption and more impressed by ownership. You stop asking how much something costs and start asking what it costs you over 10 years. Short-term thinkers buy liabilities to feel successful. Long-term thinkers acquire assets to become free. They are patient with returns because they understand compounding. Compounding is quiet at first, almost invisible. For a long time, it looks like nothing is happening. This is where most people give up. They plant seeds, dig them up to check progress, then complain that nothing grows. Long-term thinkers plant and wait. They trust process more than mood. Another overlooked aspect of decade thinking is emotional maturity. When your focus extends far into the future, petty conflicts lose their grip. Ego battles feel irrelevant. Proving people wrong becomes less important than proving yourself consistent. You stop reacting to every comment, every slight, every comparison. You conserve energy. Energy is finite. Long-term thinkers protect it ruthlessly. They avoid unnecessary drama. They choose environments that support growth. They design routines that reduce decision fatigue. They simplify their lives not because they lack ambition, but because clarity fuels momentum. Thinking in decades also reshapes how you learn. Instead of consuming information to feel smart, you consume to build frameworks. You revisit ideas. You apply slowly. You integrate lessons into behavior. Learning becomes cumulative instead of scattered. You stop jumping from strategy to strategy and start building depth. This is where mastery emerges. Mastery is not speed. It is familiarity earned through repetition. It is confidence built through exposure. It is calm under pressure because you have seen patterns repeat over time. Decade thinkers value mastery because it creates durability. Trends fade. Skills endure. The same applies to relationship. Long-term thinkers invest in trust, not transactions. They understand that reputation compounds just like money. How you treat people when you have nothing determines who stands with you when you have something. Burning bridges for short-term gain is expensive in the long run. Consistency becomes character. One of the hardest parts of long-term thinking is enduring the middle. The beginning is exciting. The end is rewarding. The middle is quiet, repetitive, and often boring. This is where discipline replaces novelty. This is where most people abandon their goals, not because they are impossible, but because they are unspectacular. Billionaire mindset survives the middle. It learns to find meaning in repetition, pride in process, satisfaction in incremental improvement. It understands that greatness is built in moments that never make headlines. Over time, decade thinking rewires your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone trying to succeed and start seeing yourself as someone building something inevitable. The anxiety fades. The urgency softens. The pressure becomes purposeful instead of paralyzing. You stop rushing life and start directing it. When you think in decades, patience is no longer passive. It is active restraint. It is choosing alignment over impulse again and again. It is trusting that if you show up consistently, time will reward you in ways that shortcuts never could. And slowly, quietly, without announcement, you begin to outgrow the version of yourself that once needed immediate results to stay committed. Chapter 9. Legacy Thinking, Beyond Wealth, Beyond Success. By the time a person reaches the stage where they have mastered risk, discipline, focus, and long-term thinking, another layer of awareness emerges. Legacy. Most people live in a loop of survival, consumption, and recognition. They measure themselves by salary, possessions, titles, or fleeting praise. Billionaires understand that these metrics are temporary, fragile, and easily lost. What lasts, what compounds even after life ends, is the impact left behind. The ideas, systems, businesses, and influence that continue independently of immediate effort. Legacy thinking is not about ego or vanity. It is not about showing off or seeking immortality through fame. It is about creating value that outlives you. It is about planting seeds that will grow decades after you are gone. This mindset changes everything. Decisions are no longer only about profit or convenience. They are about endurance, relevance, and contribution. One of the first shifts required is redefining success. Traditional success is transactional. A higher paycheck, a promotion, more clients, more social validation. Legacy success is transformational. How many lives does your work touch? How much knowledge or resource can you pass on to the next generation? How resilient are the systems you create, and how widely can they ripple through time? When this becomes the framework, everything else, the daily distractions, the instant gratification, the superficial achievements, fades in importance. Billionaires think in terms of layers of influence. Personal wealth is only the first layer. Beyond that is wealth building for family, employees, partners, and communities. Beyond that is wealth building for society at large. Innovation that changes industries, philanthropy that reshapes opportunity, ideas that change thinking. The richest individuals in the world are rarely those who hoard value. They are the ones who understand leverage, multiply impact, and expand the circle of effect around them. This mindset also changes how you approach work. When you are focused on legacy, your efforts are strategic, deliberate, and intentional. You ask yourself, will this decision still matter in 5, 10, or 50 years? If the answer is no, it is deprioritized. If the answer is yes, it receives attention, effort, and care far beyond what is typical. Small actions are evaluated not by immediate outcomes but by their contribution to enduring structures, habits, and influence. Another crucial dimension is mentorship and knowledge transfer. Billionaires recognize that their time is finite, but their knowledge can live indefinitely if properly shared. They create systems to teach, document, and mentor. They understand that empowering others is not just altruism, it is leverage. Ideas that multiply through capable people have exponential impact. One brilliant strategy, shared with hundreds of competent minds, produces outcomes far beyond what one person could accomplish alone. At the same time, legacy thinking is deeply personal. Billionaires evaluate not only financial systems but ethical, intellectual, and emotional ones. They ask, will the structures I leave behind inspire integrity, curiosity, and resilience? They understand that influence without alignment to values is fragile. Wealth can decay. Businesses can collapse. Ideas can be misused. But systems grounded in principles are more likely to endure. This thinking reframes failure as well. When your focus is on legacy, short-term failures are contextualized. They become experiments, teaching opportunities, and iterative improvements. Losses are not endpoints, they are data. Each mistake is a lesson in durability, systems design, and human behavior. The billionaire mindset transforms the emotional weight of failure into strategic insight for what endures. Time itself is perceived differently at this stage. Most people live within the confines of their lifespan, the years they can see and feel directly. Billionaires cultivate the perspective that actions today influence decades, centuries, or even millennia if properly structured. Buildings, institutions, ideas, and culture are all forms of temporal leverage. A single innovation can impact countless future lives if carefully nurtured. Decisions are evaluated for ripple effects, not just immediate returns. Legacy thinking also reshapes personal identity. When wealth is no longer the ultimate measure, your self-worth is measured by the quality and reach of your contributions. You are no longer dependent on recognition or status. You are invested in something larger than yourself. This creates emotional stability, humility, and a sense of purpose that motivates relentlessly, even when rewards are delayed or invisible. Relationships are another critical layer. Billionaires surround themselves with people who enhance the durability of their efforts. They cultivate networks of high-capacity individuals who share vision, competence, and integrity. Mentorship, collaboration, and partnership become central to strategy. Isolation is avoided because no single person can sustain monumental impact alone. Influence multiplies when combined with capable minds, aligned intentions, and mutual trust. At this level, wealth is no longer about scarcity or accumulation. It is about creation, protection, and amplification. You create systems that generate resources, you protect the structures that preserve their function, and you amplify their reach to touch as many lives as possible. This is why the richest minds invest not only in money but in culture, knowledge, and influence. Billionaires also think in layers of adaptability. Legacy is not static. Systems must evolve to survive changing conditions, technologies, and societal norms. They build in flexibility. They design redundancy. They plan for disruption. They do not assume permanence in rigid structures. Endurance is not built through resistance to change but through responsiveness to change while preserving core principles. This mindset is not abstract. It manifests in concrete daily actions. Every investment, business decision, relationship, and personal habit is aligned with the horizon of legacy. Work is prioritized for multiplier effect. Decisions are filtered for long-term relevance. Habits are maintained not because they are easy, but because they support the framework of enduring influence. Discipline, patience, risk management, and adaptability are constantly exercised to reinforce systems that outlast the individual. Finally, legacy thinking transforms life into a narrative that transcends self-interest. Ordinary lives are reactive. Billionaire lives are proactive. Each day, each decision, each sacrifice is a brushstroke in a canvas that will be visible to generations beyond the present. The satisfaction is not fleeting applause but the knowledge that your work will continue to shape outcomes, inform choices, and elevate possibilities long after your own time has passed. And in this perspective, everything you do today matters infinitely more. Every choice is imbued with significance. Every challenge becomes an opportunity to fortify the structures that will carry value forward. Every act of discipline, focus, and patience becomes a building block in a legacy that is not merely measured in dollars, titles, or trophies, but in the enduring impact of your vision, execution, and resilience. This is the final frontier of billionaire mindset. Not accumulation, not fame, not transient recognition, but the deliberate, disciplined creation of enduring systems, influence, and value that will ripple across time, shaping worlds long after you are gone.